AP Psychology students, and welcome back. Today we are continuing talking about the topics of motivation and emotion, and we are switching from motivational theories to talking about two specific human motives, so hunger and belonging. And this relates to College Board topic 4.6, objective 4.6 also, which is explain how eating and belongingness motivate behavior and mental processes. And the two essential questions that we're going to be focusing on today are what factors influence our motivation to eat and what factors influence our motivation to belong. So when we talk about these motives, right, hunger and belongingness, it's important to remember that there is no one singular cause or factor that leads to the decision to eat or to belong. That hunger is motivated by many biological, psychological, and sociocultural influences, right? So if we try to answer questions like why do we eat, or what do we eat, or when do we eat, or how do we eat, all of those things, right, are motivated by a combination of our biology, the way that our psychology, the way we think, the way that we learn, our emotions, our memories, and our culture and our society, our family, our traditions, our socioeconomic status, etc. So let's start with the biological influences, right? When we think about biological influences on hunger, a lot of people naturally go to the stomach, right? So you think of stomach, your stomach's growling, right? So they did some research and they found out that if they removed the stomach of somebody, right? Like if your stomach was gone, would you still feel hunger, right? And the answer is yes, you would, right? So while it's not that hunger isn't influenced by the stomach, it is. There's hormones the stomach releases that increase or decrease hunger. It's just that it's not primarily influenced by the stomach, that you can be hungry and feel hunger without actually having a stomach. And that's because the primary influence of your hunger in terms from biology is your brain. So when we talk about the brain and hunger, two things that we're going to focus on are the hypothalamus and blood glucose. So remember, your hypothalamus, feeding, fighting, fleeing, making love. So feeding is that first one, right? And there are two parts of the hypothalamus that are responsible for this. So you've got the ventromedial and the lateral. The ventromedial hypothalamus makes you feel full, and the lateral hypothalamus makes you feel hungry. Now, how does this relate to blood glucose levels? Well, if you see in this chart over here, you are hungry, and then you eat, and that increases your blood glucose, which then turns on the ventromedial hypothalamus saying, oh, you're full. That's what satiety means. So you stop eating, which then lowers your blood glucose. So then your lateral hypothalamus turns on and says, eat, right? And it's a cycle that goes round and round depending on your blood glucose levels and how much energy your body is utilizing and needs, etc. Another big biological influence that deals with the brain are hormones, right? So we remember that the hypothalamus controls the pituitary gland. So it's the link between the central nervous system and the endocrine system, right? So the hypothalamus controls the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland then stimulates the other glands or other cells to release two hormones that are essential for hunger. So the first is leptin. Leptin is released by your fat cells, and it makes you feel full, right? And then ghrelin is released by your stomach, and it makes you feel hungry. So when your body wants you to eat, it'll release ghrelin. When your body wants you to stop eating, it will release leptin, right? And again, remember, those are released by the pituitary, or they're controlled by the pituitary gland, which is controlled by the hypothalamus. And then finally, another biological influence is our genetics, right? So ultimately, we come kind of pre-programmed with a set kind of point in our weight that our body wants to stay at. We have different metabolic rates based on our genetic history or our genes. There are some research into obese genes and how obesity can be genetically kind of programmed. So there are different genetic components that can lead to how much or how little or how often you eat or how full you feel or those kinds of things. All right, so let's talk about now some of the environmental or psychological, social influences on hunger. So first is culture, right? Culture really influences our taste preferences, like what we think looks good, what we're willing to eat. Different cultures think that different things are super gross or weird, right? So this is a picture, you see two pictures here of foods that are popular in other places of the world and that they're eaten all the time. One of them is a fruit that people say smells like stinky socks and onions. The other one is a larva, caterpillar type bug. And both of those to Americans seem pretty disgusting. However, in other cultures, they are totally like acceptable and even like thought about as delicacies. Whereas in other cultures might think about something the United States eats as like kind of weird. So some examples of things that I've read is like peanut butter. Some people think is really weird. Hot dogs. Just if you think about like what makes up a hot dog is a weird food, right? Or like a corn dog. But those are foods that we're used to, right? And so they seem normal. The media can influence your how much you eat, right, and your eating patterns. So is there a thin ideal in society? Is there like certain models that you're trying to look out for and like influence kind of your role in nutrition or hunger or listening to your body or not, etc. And then there's also like just general like personal and situational impacts. So the time of day, right? Like is it lunchtime? So you're like, oh, I should eat. It's lunchtime, even though you might not be hungry, right? Or social gatherings. So people say, research finds that people eat more when they're with other people, when they're with friends, particularly if those friends tend to eat more as well. Availability. So like what foods are available to you, right? And that can be depending on the country you live in or the socioeconomic status of your family, and that the portion sizes, right? And how that can influence how much you eat. Because if there's more food in front of you, you might be more likely to eat it. And then that means more calories, which could lead to more obesity. All these different factors can influence your hunger beyond just the biological need to eat. All right, so switching now to belonging, right? So belonging is a motive. It's actually usually referred to by psychologists as like an affiliation need. So this is the idea that we feel the need to build and maintain relationships and be a part of a group, right? Kind of like the idea to fit in, but it's not so much conformity. It's like the idea of being accepted, right? Feeling a part of something. And some of the questions we ask around this are like, why are relationships so important to us? Why do we choose our groups or relationships or friendships? Why do we feel pain when we're left out, right? Like, why does being left out feel so bad? Why do we stay in groups? Why do we leave groups or friendships or relationships, right? And again, the answer is a complicated combination of biological, psychological, and social motives, right? That influence that need to build, maintain relationships, and be a part of a group. So let's start with the biological influences again. So biological influences on the need to belong. So you're like, the need to belong is biological? Yeah, right? So natural selection favored, right, from an evolutionary perspective, favored those who with strong ties to others. If you were part of a group, had strong relationships, you had more cooperation, more attachment, increased chance for survival, right? And that then led to the breeding and the natural selection of those genes of people who were better at that to, be the ones that were chosen over time, right? And so now we have this strong drive as human beings kind of within us to be a part of a group, to be accepted, to have a family, to have relationships, to fit in, right? And this is not just true about Americans, it's true about all people all over the world, that groups are a natural part of humanity all over the world because of the evolutionary importance of being in a group and how that made it, increase your chances for survival. Psychologically and socially, there's also lots of other influences, in terms of like why we want to belong or fitting in, right? So there's clearly the cultural pressure or expectation, of like fitting in, right? So you don't want to look like the odd one out. You have your friends doing this, you're doing this. There's peer pressure, there's media influences. We see TV shows and different movies talking about like, groups and cliques and friendships and love and all these things. And so you kind of get the idea that like that's what your life is supposed to look like. Maybe you have different influences on your need to belong and how much you connect with others based on what you've learned in the past and how you've been criticized or accepted. And then there's also this really interesting idea that there is a pain, like a physical pain almost, to being ostracized or being left out, right? And how do we deal with that pain, right? And how does the fear of that pain motivate us to find places where we belong or people who will accept us? Right? And so that pain of ostracism, even though it's not a physical thing, it does feel physical, right? It feels, the sense of sadness and loneliness, like feels like a real pain that you would describe if you got hurt or cut or something, right? So today we focused on two basic human motives. So the need to belong, and kind of connected with the need for love and relatedness and family and being in a group, and the need for hunger. And so make sure before you stop this video today that you can answer our essential questions. That's all for now, AP Psychos. And remember, psychology is flippin' awesome.